Welcome everybody to another episode of the Key to Games podcast. Here on Game Wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. I am Josh Placer, and join me, my co-host and the developer working on the game Samurai Pig, Joshua Reyes. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent, man. It's been a busy week. Bugs, kids getting real life bugs, neighbors flooding over, all kind of fun stuff. So I am ready to have a nice chat about game design. How you doing, my friend?
Doing alright. Busy as always. Have some library presentations coming up. Gotta write the next book. And I got like so many hours of footage I need to finally start breaking down into videos and let's plays for both channels.
Editing on editing, man.
Oh, sure. Yes. Gotta reclaim all those gigabytes I have on my second drive.
We'll have to do a side podcast about if you do video game development, how much video editing you actually have to do also.
Hey, Amanda, how are you doing? But, yeah, we got, once again, another very interesting topic lined up. We've spoken about lengths and kind of what is good length for games in the past, but for today, we're going to try and frame this in terms of both good for the short side and good for the long side. And the reason why is that it was announced this week that on Xbox's Games Pass and their storefront, they're integrating the how long it takes to beat metric to the store pages. So going forward, when you go to look on a game for Xbox, it will tell you not only the ESRB rating and all that, but how long it generally takes to beat the game. Whether it could be an hour, 50 hours, whatever we're up to in like a Final Fantasy or an Elden Ring, and so on. And it's only got some people on Twitter, at least like game dev wise, a little, doing like this with their shirt. They're getting a little nervous about it. And it's a very interesting prospect when we talk about game length, because it certainly has, I think, in terms of the popularity or the accepted length of a game, it has waxed and waned dramatically over the past 40 years. Again, if we're talking about, 90s kind of games, if your game wasn't at least 80 to 100 hours, it was considered, a failure of a game. Then
exactly. Yeah. It was like if you didn't reach a certain metric of playtime, your game was garbage. That was a fun time.
Mm-hmm. And then as we entered the 2000s, when kind of the rise of the cinematic games, this is when we kind of began to see this more standardized of, an 8 to 10 hour long single player game. It had to be at least that long, and of course it had to have a multiplayer component to extend things.
Exactly.
And then as we entered the last decade, with the rise of the independent scene, it's kind of gone all over the place. On one hand, you have short-form games like Thomas Was Alone, the Stanley Parable, Gone Home, and so on. And on the flip side, we have, of course, the rise of the roguelikes and the roguelites, where you can spend, several hundred hours easily going through games like The Binding of Isaac, Spelunky, and even with kind of narrative-driven games these days. I mean, look at Elden Ring. There's a reason why I include that on the thumbnail. Elden Ring is a very long game. We could argue maybe a tad too long.
Too long, yeah.
And yet, it is probably going to be the most played video game of 2022 at this rate.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking at how long to beat in just the main story alone, 52 hours and a half. And if you do the main and extra, 98, and then for the full completion, it's 131 hours. And I think that's kind of underselling it, man.
Yeah, that kind of feels a little short, which is scary.
Yeah, it's did I do something wrong?
And I just pounded my head against the wall to the very end of Elden Ring.
And that's the only way to play.
True. And as an interesting metric for Elden Ring, in terms of completion, it is sitting at, let's see, there's Horth Lux, Millennia, Age of the Stars. Looks like it's sitting at maybe around like 26, maybe a little bit higher percentage of clear. And for a game that long, that's really damn impressive.
That's really good. That's like what at least a quarter of your players stuck around to beat the whole every part of it.
Yep, 34% beat Melania, and I did not beat that on my run because my character was not at all spec for that fight at
No,
anything.
me neither.
And
Not a chance.
this, I think, is a good, first topic for or for this episode. With Elden Ring, again, there are a lot of people right at launch or just before, decrying the game, saying no one's going to play it, it's too hard. We already had our discussion about just kind of the game just like throws you out to the wolves, and people were going to hate that. And yet, look at this. We have a game that has surprisingly high clear rates and very consistent churn. Like, I'm trying to look on the store page. Let me look really fast here. So they lost about 20% of the player base before getting to the round table. Which, again, for a Souls game and for games in general, you're going to lose at least, I would say, 15 to 20%. Almost like that's like you're given.
Right. Like past the menu screen, you lost that many players.
Yeah. But again, what's very interesting is that after that, it becomes very consistent, maybe losing between 3 to 5% of the player base, going from, progress achievement to progress achievement. So, something stuck with people. And again, Elden Ring is a very unusual case, with it having the From Software branding. But I guess here is the question for you and for the audience. Do you think that game length, as we talk about in terms of hours per play, do you think that is a suitable metric for game quality or game measuring today?
Not at all. I think that as you said, it's waxed and waned over the whole time. It's because really, I don't think it's actually mattered. I think you can get a good man, just like you can get a good quality. There's a reason they don't make like 20-hour movies or something, right? Movies only so long, and that's because like an experience can only last so long. You can only stretch it out so long. So yeah, I don't think there's any relative like quality and the length have no correlation, I think, at all. They can affect each other in negative ways, of course, right? A padded game's just gonna totally crank it down. But no, not I don't think in any way at all. You can like have a masterpiece. For example, Mario Brothers is 2 hours like to complete it, right? Portal 3 hours. Let me see, what else was it? So yeah, I mean, if you could say Mario Brothers wasn't quality because it was only 2 hours, the first one, right? Or Portal only being 3 hours, definitely is like proving that wrong, right?
And it is a very, as you said, like, quality and quantity are very unusual metrics when it comes to video games. And hey, Pony, thanks for stopping by.
Hey, Pony.
Like, we've played a lot of fantastic games that are on the shorter side. We've played some that are great, even at, super long lengths. But I think what you said about padding is a very important point, that I feel consumers are far more receptive, or they're far more able to pay attention to when a game feels like it's dragging on. And I guess here's a question, or I guess to follow that up. What do you think are the major, I guess, like, telltale signs that a game feels like it's being padded out? Like, how, like, for you, like, when you're playing a game, like, what kind of, like, goes to your mind going, wait a minute, this should have ended by now?
Number one would be backtracking, right? Like backtracking for sure. If it makes me go back through the same thing, I'm like, okay. And then just like repetitive side quests. If for some reason, very repetitive and like derivative, like tedious side quests, that makes me feel like I'm padding. Actually, Josh, what makes you sets off that red flag for you?
I would say definitely that sense that it just feels like the story is not really going anywhere. That, hey, I'm just, you have to go collect this thing to then go collect another thing. And hey, now we have to go back over here. Like, this is one of the issues, I think, with Super Daryl Deluxe that I played on stream, that it just felt like every quest was just a collection of, hey, you went over here, now go back over here. Now you got some there, bring it back over here, now go back there. And one of the things that drives me crazy in games like this is when you have a kill all the enemies challenge and it doesn't count the ones you've already killed. Like, that just infuriates me. I just spent the last hour killing 50 enemies, but now the quest says, oh, you have to kill 30. Okay, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I learned that hard lesson about MMOs a long time ago, and I knew a quest was coming up, so I went ahead and got some of the mobs, and then I went to the quest, and it was like they don't drop until you like activate the quest, right? So
and that kind of sense that the story is not really going anywhere.
No progression, right? You feel nothing happening. Mainly like you're just doing useless tasks in the game that don't push the story forward, or are mainly like padding your progression in some way.
And I guess here's like we're talking about, or they're chatting about Elden Ring in the chat over there. Elden Ring is, I think, a very interesting example. Again, not just in terms of how long it is, but again, that sense of being able to sustain itself. That with a game like Elden Ring or with other like reflex-driven games, there's always another boss. There's always some other massive, dragon or very annoying fight coming down the line. And I think another aspect when it comes to padding is that when it feels like there's more time, I guess, in between the excitements of your game. Like, in a lot of, like, walking simulation or, story-driven games, it could just be, hey, you need to now, spend 30 minutes walking over here to get a cutscene, then go to another 20 minutes over here, and then we have our actual epic fight for 3 minutes, and then it's 15 more minutes of cutscenes.
Yeah, definitely. There are 25 dragons in Elden Ring.
Looks like there's... Oh, I killed like 3 or 4 of them. I know there must be like, I guess like 90% of them must be in Khalid.
Yeah, they're all there for sure.
And I think another aspect, and I think this goes with kind of like the design of padding, is that can a player circumvent it? Or is it forced?
That's like the main thing, right? Like if it's optional stuff, if it's optional things, and then it's not really padding, right? Like if the main core story, I don't know, 5 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, something like that, and you have a whole bunch of optional stuff that really isn't necessary for the story. It's more like lore exploration or something else to like expand the game, but it's not really needed. Well, then of course that's really cool. That's not padding. So if it's forced, if it's required padding, or if it's just something you can circumvent, like you were saying, Josh, definitely.
And when it's required, and not only is it required, but it doesn't feel like it's adding to your actual game. Like, this is where we talk about grinding. That the act of grinding for levels or to buy more gear, that's not changing the actual moment-to-moment gameplay. It's just raising your numbers. And it's a huge aspect of a lot of the mobile games, especially some of the far, like, grindier, less player-friendly games, where if you want to upgrade a character, you need to collect all these materials. But to collect all these materials, you have to do all these repeatable side quests. And then you run out of energy, so you have to wait. So it takes, like, a month to upgrade, like, one character.
Yeah, those are, like, super egregious. Yeah, especially, like, time-gated stuff, right? Like, that's really that gets a little egregious on that end.
And when we talk about how much length has really changed, I think to a point you said a few minutes ago that good length in a game. Which Josh are you talking about? But welcome as well. But good length in a game, it's over when it feels like it's time to be over. And I think that's a very hard thing to kind of represent, but it's an idea that the game feels like it's done everything. Like, there's nothing more the game can throw at you. There's nothing more to test the player on. And I think this is, again, one of those good things about From Software, is that they're really good at pacing their designs, about always having another layer of challenge. I was thinking about with the whole discussion about God of War, I was thinking about Sekiro,
Mm.
and I felt like
Saw
Sekiro
your
is
tweet. I saw your tweet about that. The
yeah,
Valkyrie fight. Yes.
that like Sword Saint Ishin Isen is a thing a really solid final boss. It feels like a culmination of everything the game teaches you. Like it doesn't feel like they could just say, "Oh, you beat Sword Saint Ison. Here's 10 more bosses." Like that felt like it was like the final note in that game. Whereas we can see with a lot of games, it just was like, okay, here's a boss, here's another boss. They just keep doing boss rushes all over again. And there's no real sense of flow, I think, between them.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I the boss of Valkyrie, we could probably do a podcast on that. Like I was like the design on that one at the end, how it kind of like it's an accumulation of like everything that you've learned in the game, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think the same thing with the Ishin we're talking about, is that they're both like accumulation of everything you've learned. And it's all the mechanics put together in a really elegant package, right? Awesome stuff. So study boss design, that's a really excellent boss design to study. Ishin. That's right.
And when we look at kind of the amount of time that a game should be, like we're still talking about long, but we'll talk about short games in a few minutes. But good length for kind of, I guess, like for mechanic heavy games, that is very tricky. Again, when we talk about story driven, typically you want the story to match the gameplay. If you're trying to tell this amazing, 10 to 20 hour mystery, you want your game to be 60 to 80 hours. Conversely, if it's supposed to be this very long story, you don't want, 20 minutes of gameplay.
Exactly. They do have to match up. That's yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know, Pony. I really hated that final fight in Elden Ring there. Only reason I won was I think I cheesed the AI at the end. And I'm taking that as my W for
Yeah, for
that.
real. Any win's a win in that game for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about a game like a Disco Elysium, when we talk about something that is entirely or majority focused, story driven, that there are games that they just want you, or they just feel really great to run around those worlds. Where it's not so much about the gameplay, it's just about you want to experience what's happening in terms of the story and the major beats.
Yeah, definitely. Like you can definitely get so much like out of a living, breathing world that you want to have experienced. And moment to moment gameplay in a game can definitely help like remove that padding feel, right? If the moment to moment everything is really enjoyable, whatever you're doing, just standing around looking at NPCs is cool. Just what regard like the moment to moment gameplay being fun and exciting, or just chill and a vibe that you want to be in, can really remove that padding and make it feel like the length doesn't really matter, or at all in your quality view of the game.
Mm-hmm. And when we look at like how much things have shifted in terms of the independent space, that a lot of indie developers, I think, tend to do one of two things. They either make very focused titles, or as we've seen with the rise of roguelikes, and this is something that I know I've spoken about many times, not just here up on the design videos, that chase for, the infinitely replayable game. That idea
Yeah.
that, we need to crack that code and make that 10,000 hour long experience. And a lot of games that try to do that, it always seems to end in failure for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that you're going like for an infinitely like procedural generated something probably is possible, but the thing is everybody's trying to do it, right? And there has to be some care like in what you're crafting, like, and so when you're going from linear to just completely procedural, there's a big difference in what you can accomplish there.
Mm-hmm. I still need to record my video about why procedural generation will not save a
Yeah.
bad game.
Yeah.
Because, again, I think, as we've said, quality, I think, has become more of a factor over, we could maybe say, the last 5 years. Again, like 2016 to maybe 2017, 2018, that was kind of like the race to the bottom that we saw with the rise
Yeah.
of mobile. But It has changed a lot, I think. Not only with just kind of the more acceptance of indie development and, games that aren't Call of Duty or Madden, but of course, we have far less time these days, as, the world is we're on the, nightmare mode +3 right now.
Nightmare Multiplicity for sure. Yeah, time is totally different. We all value our time differently. So like golden short games are like amazing, and like I think they've definitely, and then since like the indie, I remember there was a time when people just wouldn't even want to play indies, or they didn't even consider indies. They were like, "Whoa, why are you playing an indie, man? Like we're not friends anymore." and
Mm-hmm.
uh and so like, but now indies are like totally respected, and people value them, and so what they allowed to bring to the table, all that experimentation, everything really helped kind of like change some of the things that you can do with the length of a game, that you really can like make an amazing, like I've played some really, I can't remember the name. I feel bad, but I remember I played like a 15-minute game or like a 10-minute game, just like little experiences, and some of them are really neat. Where they were like game jam games, but a complete cohesive story. And I was like, you can't do anything more to it. This was perfect as it is. Like anything else would be padding, right? And so a lot of experimentation that you can do in the indie realm really has like shifted everybody's perspective about what you can do. That it doesn't have to be a 60-hour campaign with a massive, with towers that you have to climb, and everything has to be unlocked, and all of your gear, you have to get pelts for all of your gear, and your pelt gets upgraded, and you can do all that stuff in a simpler, more cohesive way.
Mm-hmm. And when you do it right like that, it definitely resonates with consumers more. Because,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
we've said before, that you want someone to leave your game feeling like they enjoyed it. That's
yeah.
not like, oh, it's over, thank you. It's
Yeah,
like,
the worst. That's the worst thing, where you're like, oh my god, finally gonna beat this game. It's over with. And I've seen you like playing games. You're like, oh my god, we're finally gonna beat this game tonight. I hope. And everybody's, they're like, please beat the game. And you don't want that. You want to be like, oh man, I don't want this. But like right now, the wife who's reading a book, and she's almost at the end of it, and she doesn't want to finish the book, right? And so you kind of want to elicit that same feel in a game if possible. You're like, you want to leave them wanting more, right? Even if you don't plan on making a sequel, which we talked about in the previous
Mhm.
podcast. But that is the main thing. That's one of the goal things that you're looking for. And again, like I think that people definitely respect more like a really like solid quality short game that tells so much more in a shorter amount of more concise time. This is, I feel like there's a lot more respect for it now too.
Mhm. I mean, if you look at stuff like what was it, Immortality that just came out by Sam Barlow, the kind of like FMV style games from Vecchi Studios, that there's more room, I think, for a lot of either shorter or more unusual games. The idea that every game has to be a 30 to 50 hour long open world sandbox, or everyone needs to copy Grand Theft Auto or Fortnite or Genshin or so on, that doesn't really play that much these days.
No, not at all. And it's a good thing too. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, geez, when was it when every game had to be an open world RPG? That was a rough time, like I'm sure people like that were enjoying, there's some people that was like that was the best time ever, but really, I mean, can you actually, how many open world 180-hour games can you play in 1 year and not get sick of it? It's so, I think it's definitely a breath of fresh air to have both of those in our ecosystem, and even them in the middle, right? Just all in between.
Mm-hmm. How many, 80 to 1 hour long JRPGs that people finished during the 90s?
Gosh, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. I don't know if I could finish another one now. I don't know if I could do it because I've already done it before. I had a little bit of time with Persona 5. So
Mm-hmm. And I guess here's a question, because there's another game we have to bring up every week, would be Yakuza. Yakuza
Yakuza.
games are very interesting in terms. I knew that was coming. That Yakuza games are very interesting in terms of that sense of how long they are. Like, these are games that are almost like almost like anti-establishment in terms of their designs.
Yeah.
Like it
Punk
is.
rock.
It's like, okay, here's a Yakuza game. Now spend the first hour or 2 hours watching cutscenes. Here's one fight. Here's another 3 hours of cutscenes. Now the game can actually begin, but now we need another hour-long cutscene. And again, like, you're not a Yakuza fan until you've actually sat there and watched an entire ending. Like, the ending is a movie onto itself.
Onto itself, yeah. I think I've seen memes about it. I
don't. And with, like, these kinds of games, and of course, like, Hideo Kojima would be another really good example. Like, there are games that feel like... I guess here's another question for you and for the chat. When do you feel like a game takes too long to get going? And when do you feel like the game kind of throws you too early? That, it's that difference between, here's a 20-hour long tutorial, and, here's 3 words, here's, 3 lines of tutorial, now go master this game.
Wow, that's kind of a difficult question. I don't know. I mean, for sure, like, if I'm sitting through, like, if the first thing I'm doing is, like, honestly, like, my thing is, like, get me into the gameplay right away, right? Like, let me feel the gameplay, because sometimes I feel a little bit, I guess, conned, right? Like, I'm watching this cutscene, it's awesome, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? And then all of a sudden I get control, and it's like the worst, like, control ever or something, or the combat, or I don't vibe with it. But you have to sit through a long, like, cutscene after cutscene, and you're not sure. I prefer if just get me some gameplay first, so I can get a feel for it, and then after that we can kind of slow it down a little bit if needed. But let me feel what the game's about, what I'm going to be doing moment to moment, and we can go from there. But I think, like, like, starting up a game and sitting through a long cutscene, maybe it's just me. But I don't like a game studying on just like that. I prefer more like storytelling through gameplay, storytelling through the environment, right? There's, like, other ways to do it than forcing me to watch a movie at the very start, right? Maybe that's just, like, one way to look at it.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that definitely doomed the Super Tower Deluxe. Like, it starts with, like, a good 10 minutes of very slow talking for a game that's all about high pace, super fast paced combat and weirdness. And I think the example for me in terms of too short, definitely a lot of CRPGs where it's like you begin the game, and now I want you to find your entire character for the next 200 hours. And if you make any mistakes here, you've completely wrecked your game. And then we start the tutorial, after you've done all that. And I think it's, as a weird tangent, I think it's why I prefer a lot of the JRPG or Eastern style RPGs, where it's more about, consistent growth, where you're building your character as you play, as opposed to defining them from moment one.
Definitely. They chat says, let's see here. So, too long, bad pacing mechanics are introduced too slowly. I'm doing the same thing for too long, and non-gameplay takes forever. So definitely non-gameplay and pacing. Unskippable repeated cutscenes, intro logos, yeah, intro logos for sure. I know that's been a big offender, right? Like, you would see, like, all the technology, speed tree, Dolby Logic, and stuff like that. You could skip it on the PC. Yeah, those are nice.
Or how many people have, like, edited out those logos in the config files after you've watched it once? Right. I know, Pony. It's NVIDIA. You've seen it 37 times. We know.
Havoc.
It's not a spoiler anymore. It's not a big reveal. Yeah, and I think, to Pony's point about, like, you take too long to introduce elements. I think that is a constant challenge for a lot of both established and even, like, esoteric designs, where it feels like, hey, you're going to spend the first 5 hours just doing, walk and jump. Now we're going to do this ability to run. Or it's the opposite, where, okay, we're going to start you off with every single thing, try and figure something out. And again, there's something to be said about good pacing and structure. When you look at something like a Factorio or Dyson Sphere program, that they are very challenging games in terms of their logistics, but they always start you out very quickly, or they start you out very small, but they move you along very fast. And I think that is something that needs to be more understood by people. That if Factorio would have started, if Factorio as a game starts you maybe an hour ahead of what it would be now, it would probably be borderline unplayable for a lot of new players. They want to know what's going on. Why is everything set up like this?
Yeah.
But what makes that work, and also from a logistics standpoint, is that it presents everything in a logical order, and it always teases you with that. Okay, yes, it's you got this work by walking over here, and you go over here, and then you do that. But why don't you just set up a conveyor belt system that goes to all these points? And now, something that would take you 3 minutes to do now takes 2 seconds. And it's that kind of organic progress. And I think, again, like this goes to what we said with Elden Ring and a lot of games as well, that if the moment-to-moment feels great, it doesn't matter if your game is an hour or 500 hours. People are going to stick with it, provided they're still engaged with it.
Exactly. Yeah. And when we were talking about the Elden Ring, the how long they drop off at the beginning, but once it has their hooks in them, right? Once they get past some of the initial learning curves, or where they're stuck in it, right? Because of the moment-to-moment gameplay, so they're stuck in it. And so after that, the drop off of people, churning or leaving, they're gonna stick to the game and stick through more often.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like to the comment a few minutes ago about that kind of, when you start playing a game, it's all exciting to actually play. It's like, ugh. Like, we can certainly say that a lot about the AAA games that have been released over the last few years, where it starts very much that same way. It's this bombastic explosion, and then you start playing, and your character, like, barely moves. It doesn't feel right. That was a big impression I got from Marvel's Avengers, where it's like, oh, this bombastic cutscene, everyone's getting ready to fight, and then you watch, 2 points of damage, 4 points of damage, 6 points of damage, and like Hulk does his like massive slam, 15 points of damage.
Nice. That just means that you just know that your damage is good. You only have up to go from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. That Pony's point about non-gun play. I don't non-gun gang play things interrupting. You can still do the things, and stopping you from your moment-to-moment gameplay to show you something can be a little intrusive, kind of off topic, but yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like as people know, one of my biggest pet peeves is the hold button to confirm. And it's not just like hold button for like a second. You got hold for like 3 to 5 seconds.
Yeah, and I always let go like right before, and then you end up pressing it like 5-6 times. Yeah, it's the best.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
Or which God of War, and you start with all your powers at the beginning, right? And you start and you're like, oh, this is what you have. I think it's 1, and you have all your powers, and then you lose them, and then you slowly have to acquire them all back again.
The second one definitely did that, and you just described the plot of every Metroid game, I think, after the first and second one.
This is true.
And Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And you can do that, I think, well, if you use it as a form of tutorializing. The worst thing you can do is, and this is something I see from a lot of newbie and first-time developers, is they make the first 5 minutes of your game horrible to control. And then they introduce, like, hey, you unlock the power to run. Hey, you can now jump. And that kind of stuff, again, you have to be really careful. And again, like this is
Which game was that? I remember. I can't remember. It was like a platformer, and then it gives you jump later. I guess that's a common thing that some devs do. Then it's like they tutorialize the mechanics, but they take it away from you until the tutorial comes up.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's not cool. That is not good.
Or here's another pet peeve: when you start your game and you don't have the ability to run, and then it's like after like 3 minutes, all of a sudden you see press R to run. So you're telling me that you turned off my ability to run, but now because I passed that one door, my character magically can
Padding,
sprint.
padding,
Hmm.
padding through removal of mechanics.
Yep. And again, padding, especially when we have, and like going back to the proc gen point, a massive game space doesn't make your game better. Like if let's say my screen is a map and the stories have to go here, here, and here, having all of this, it doesn't really add to the game. And I think this is another area where a lot of indie devs, especially those who do like narrative or horror games, tend to suffer. They tend to hurt their experiences. Because if only those 3 points matter, building, a tri-state area,
Yeah.
and then you don't fill it with anything, that just really hurts that game. And again, like this is one of those things that we talk about when we see like kind of like the gaminess of like AAA games. That there's always, that floating orb over there, that, Ubisoft time trial challenge. And while that is hokey, it's still filling the world with stuff. And I think it's better to have stuff, even if it's just on the okay to bad side, if there's nothing. If it's like an empty space, doesn't really engage the player.
Yeah, definitely for sure. I mean, I'll agree with that for sure. Like having content is way better than not having any content because a lack of content, empty, sterile worlds, man, it just like it's like a red flag. It really shines out, and you can tell when you're playing the world. And there's just like you said, if it's a giant RPG and they made a giant map and there's only like you said three like points of interest and it's 20 minutes to here, 20 minutes to there. We could have just condensed it and made it a really nice short game and made it more, streamlined, right? And but yeah, so definitely if you have a giant world like that, just having anything to do, and I mean even the simplest of things, right, can really like bring up like having little animals that do something or having boxes that anything that adds to the gameplay or adds something to do in that map, if it's a giant map, will help. I write, just a little bit. Try and make
Mm-hmm.
it good though.
Yeah, and we saw, I think, a lot of that with kind of that first move to 3D, when
Yeah.
suddenly you could actually represent a town as an entire town as opposed to just three screens. And again, if you can't
No feels.
make that walk from point A to point B interesting, then you don't want to make that walk a 20-minute long hike. And I've said this before about platformers, that there's a difference between a game like Mario, or even that game I played a few weeks ago, Hell Pie, where the moment to moment of the platforming is really engaging. It's a lot of fun to do. Versus if you play a 3D platform where your character only has like one jump, and you have to run from point A to point B all over the map to get like your various MacGuffins. It's not that interesting. And I think again it's why a lot of people check out on these games. That if you load it up and your first experience is boredom or annoyance, what's going to keep you around?
Definitely. Yeah. So that's why I would, I say get into the action quick. Don't maybe don't like and like we're in a time where players and consumers they know how to play video games, right? Like maybe I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, tutorials made a little more sense for grandmas and stuff like that. But now grandmas are like streaming, right? And so like they're like most people understand games and the basic layouts have all been kind of standardized, right? And we like to say, stick to standardized controls for a reason. And that's so people don't have issues when they're getting in. They have to, oh, your jumps R1 instead of, I don't know, what would it be, circle or X, right? Like the normal conventions, and when you go against it.
Mm-hmm.
So first quarter of Elden Ring, yeah, definitely.
Yep, and you can do again like there are many videos and topics that we have about good tutorials and good onboarding. And you have to put the work into your onboarding. If you can engage someone and teach them about your game in 10 minutes, that is definitely masterclass game dev right there. But if it takes, an hour, 5 to 10 hours before you actually say,
Yeah,
okay,
13 hours. Yeah.
now you can start the game. Again, like, I'd still love when people defend Death Stranding and they say it's the best game ever if you can make it 12 hours in.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
you're kind of bearing the lead there in that in that defense.
Literally, the game could have been that long total, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
Yep. And the thing is, you want your story and your gameplay to be in sync in this respect. That if you're going to do a 2 hour long cutscene, you have to one, you have to make that engaging, but you also have to make the lead in and what's after that engaging as well. There are a lot of games where you finish watching a cutscene and your character's standing there. Like, okay, that cutscene happened. What do we do from here? This is one of the things I didn't like about a lot of like the open style like AAA games, where this crazy cutscene, all kinds of things are happening. Then we cut back to the gameplay, and the world is just like, yeah, that
Nothing.
that just happened. Okay, yeah, move
Just
on.
you don't even see the dust settling. Like it's gone, and you're just there with nothing to do. This is
Mm-hmm.
true. This is very true. Yeah. So when epic stuff like that happens, it should definitely permeate to like the world state in some way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in that regard.
Now, I guess as another question, like I do want to talk a little bit more about short games as a major topic. But one thing that I want to ask you about into the chat: what do you think about games that kind of provide like a variable length? And what I mean by that are games where if you're really good at it, you don't need to do as much in the world. Roguelikes and roguelites are probably a really good example of this. There are people who probably spent 2 to 500 hours trying to beat Spelunky 2. I think I beat that in about like 10 to 15 hours. I got like my first actual win. There are games where, with persistence and unlocks, that you can beat them either within like a few hours or it could
Yep.
take 20, 30, 40 hours. Yeah, I know, Pony. Humble
Humble
brag.
brag. Yeah.
And I guess, and so the question is, when you're designing a game around that, how should you treat game length? When, a skilled player could maybe need this much, a less skilled player maybe needs to go to here, and then someone who's just horrible at the game may need every single unlock and, persistent unlock you have in your entire title.
Well, I guess like from there, right? Like it's really first depends on the genre. Like if we're talking about a roguelike or something like that, let's check out. Let's actually see on how to beat. I want to see how long Spelunky. Okay, how you said you beat it in how long, Josh?
It took me like 10 hours for like my first actual like win.
It was 19 hours for the main story, guy.
Hmm. What do they
You
consider
put
main story? I hope they don't consider Cosmic Ocean because that is not 19 hours.
Yeah. Okay. No, wait. Spelunky Classic, 3 hours. Spelunky
There's like three
Update.
different Spelunkies.
Yeah, Spelunky 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so 3 hours. Let's say 3 hours. Okay, for the super fast one. Okay, so you would set it like that. Okay, we want it to be beaten, and I think 3, 4 hours is a really good time to shoot for. So you could say, okay, 4 hours, and then mid range, well, like maybe double it a little bit, like 8, and then go
Mm-hmm.
from there 8, and then maybe 20. So like it would just be like doubling it for each one. Um, and that would probably work out as a good increment, right?
Mm-hmm. And again, I think it's as long as the player feels like they're moving forward. Again, a lot of this discussion that we're having today all stems from pacing and good design or a good sense of progression with your game. If someone hates your game, they're not going to want to muscle through that pain for 50, 60, 80 hours long.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about with a game like a Rogue Legacy. And like there are some games where you can get through them very quickly, but it also feels very annoying when you're just kind of forced to do those unlocks. And again, it's very hard to get that kind of progression right. Do you balance the boss and the enemies on someone getting everything? Do you balance it on, 60%? Because there are games where it feels like your first 5 to 10 runs are just filler. Because there's no way you're going to win. Like, a level 1 character is never going to beat, a boss fight.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, then, what's the point of starting at level 1 then?
Yeah. Padding, I guess, right? Just to pad it out as much as possible.
Will do it. Yeah, and you want to give that sense when it comes to like some of these longer games or these more variable titles that every run or every play should matter in some respect. Again, I think this is again why Hades did so well. That no matter what, win, lose, or draw,
you came away with something.
Yep, something gets moved forward.
Yeah,
and
you moved one piece, even if it was like just a little bit. You unlock something, and so like it gives you a reason to like keep going. You're like, okay, well now I got this little bit more, or whatever I could do. And then also the story like would move around a little bit. Like you'd go back into, and then something would change or something. So like no matter what, every death was like it was a new door, something else new would happen, and it would change something else. So it was really organic, and it felt really good. Like every death didn't it was a death, but you were rewarded in a way like to keep going. Like so that's one of the really cool things about it.
And to a Pony's comment, like games that feature a lot of fluff in their UI, that's another annoyance. Like a very classic example is having to watch a loading screen when you die or open up a door. Like we were talking about this during when I was playing Curse Crackers and the developer was on. We were talking about how you die, 3 seconds you're back in, and I think for a lot of general consumers they may not understand what's the difference between 2 seconds after you die and maybe 6 seconds.
Big.
But you have to again remember that it's every single death. Or if you have to fiddle through a menu every time you want to start a battle in a multiplayer game, yes, it's maybe 10 seconds, 20 seconds out of your life. But if you're doing this every 10 minutes, those 20 seconds add up very fast. And it's also just bad design. It's also why for a lot of games, like for me, when I play some titles that have all these choices, I'm just like, you know what? Random it all. Let me just start. Like I don't want to pick every single thing. Just hit random. Go. Get me in.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, you remember what? Oh yeah, like with Tekken. Like how long those that load was and to get started in the game.
Yeah, the load is horrendous. You're sitting there forever, ever and ever. But yeah, I mean, like, was it like Super Meat Boy? I'm trying to remember. Like one of the first ones that like the deaths. I noticed that they were like instant death if you die and you're instantly back in the game. Like Meat Boy is like 0.5 of a second. I don't know. You die in your millisecond and you're back there. So it's not that painful. But imagine if it had to load. Or you've had to press retry or something. If you had like just like 2 button prompts or 1 button prompt in between, the game would change and it wouldn't be as enjoyable. Like literally, like that would be like a killer if it had long loading screens. If they didn't figure out, well, how do we restart it so quick? The game would not be fun.
Yep, and you do not want the UI or the UX of your game to feel like it's padding or feel like it's padding. Because again, these are those little things that it doesn't sound that bad. But it can be the difference between somebody playing your game and just going, oh, I don't want to play this anymore. Again, like for people, like here's a really good like little mental test. Imagine playing Mario, and every time you die, you have to wait 30 seconds before you get another life or before you can start things up again. You would probably be pulling your hair out after like the
Yeah.
first 2 or 3 deaths.
Yeah.
And you want, again, like, and this is something that we've said before about your core gameplay loop, that anything that distracts or gets in the way of the player feeling that great moment-to-moment gameplay, it has to be removed or mitigated as much as possible. Look at the ARPG genre with the introduction of just, recommended pieces. I don't have to spend 20 minutes looking through and making sure I get that 0.075% more DPS. Just hit equip best, put all my fancy shiny loot, let me get back to the hack and slashing.
Exactly. I think on like the past 3 shows we've mentioned that equip best. Always put that on if you have a lot of gear, have an equip best option.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, to Pony's comment, you don't want the play. And I think this is another big point about padding and something that people need to understand. Time should not be a punishment in your game. And what I mean by that is, as we've said before, and this is something I talk with Tomo about a lot, the player needs to feel like they're moving forward. Whether it's by miles, feet, inches, centimeters, anything smaller than that. The second you say, okay, the player's here, and now they're over here because they died,
yeah,
that feels like a gut punch and a half. And if every time they die, it becomes easier to die, so they fail even more,
yeah,
that it will ruin your game. One of the things I like about Curse Cracker is that what they do when you die is that your little purse or whatever, it drops and you lose some money. You can go get it. But if you die a second, third, or fourth time, you don't lose any money. It's only that first initial death that there's only like this kind of light slap on the wrist. Whereas with a lot of mobile games, it's like, well, you lose, well, there goes all your energy, all your resources. Like, that's the thing that drives me crazy about, like, Marvel Contest of Champions, is that you can play that game, spend 10, 20 minutes doing some crazy mission or whatever, you lose all your characters and you have to restart. Not only do you lose all the rewards you get, but anything that you use to try to get to that point is gone.
Yeah, I mean that's like totally not respecting the time. Like for one, the consumer, the player is for one giving you their time, purchasing the game. They're taking their time to play the game, and like doing things like that are not respecting their time, right? I can't remember what game. There was like a Luigi's Mansion or something. I think I was playing, and I kept dying or the battery kept and anyway my progress, so like I couldn't finish this one mission and my progress kept setting me back like all the way to the beginning, and that was it. Like that gun punch, like I just couldn't do it. I was like, wait, this is a really long mission. I died and then I'm pushed all the way back and I have to do every single thing again. And like that stuff is just really irritating, right? Like you have to allow like some progress, right? If the player is playing, allow a little bit of progress. Being pushed back, being like, or for example, I can remember in Final Fantasy 11, if you died, you would de-level, right? And we're talking about this game back in the day. I don't know, to get one level, you literally would spend like all day like grinding and on camps. And if you made one little mistake, you would de-level. So you could lose like all of your day's work or 2 days work or 3 days work of playing a game. First of all, we probably should have been playing a game that requires that much time. That was my bad. But but that setting the player back that much can be very like demotivating, like a ton. So yeah.
Again, like I've told the story about what Ramin said, that he made a lot of money doing corpse runs for people back with EverQuest. That he would help them out so they didn't like lose all their loot and their character. He made a lot of money off of that.
Smart.
I should do like a Double May Cry or a Sekiro thing. I'll pay me and I'll beat the boss for you.
I'll be your Sekiro boss. There you go.
Mm-hmm. And to Pony's comment, I think that was one of the things I really liked about with Celeste, that all the collectibles, once you kind of get a certain distance away from the map or from the challenge, it locks it in for you, so you don't have to repeat that. And again, it's all about respecting the player's time. Yeah. If your game is already 30, 50, 60 hours long, you don't need to make that even longer for them.
No, not at all. I mean, yeah, again, like it really comes down to like respecting the time. So like when you're really thinking about it and we're really like pacing out the game, you're really making it like, okay, like what is the player going to be doing? Are they going to be enjoying this time? And what are they doing there in this time? If they're doing useless things that are not important and they don't really even matter, like why would you be doing that to someone like at all? Like that's kind of cruel in a way. And
Yep, and I'm glad you brought that up. I was just thinking about, again, with respecting the player's time or making them do menial things.
yeah.
I hate prep work or losing prep items in games where I have to
Mm.
spend 5-10 minutes building potions or
Monster
crafting
Hunter, baby.
bullets. What was that?
Monster Hunter.
Yeah. Make it quick. Make it something that is super snappy. Like with Monster Hunter, what I like that you do in the later ones is that it's just like, okay, you just want to autocraft all this stuff? Yes, just turn autocraft. It's in my inventory. Make it. But I hate that idea where you have to manually do it, or you have to manually grind and get this stuff. And then if you fail, your punishment is you have to do it all a
All of it.
second and a third and a fourth time. Because what does, and this is something that I hate about Moral Concept Champs again with their use of like the revive and the healing potions, but it's also something that I didn't like about with Bloodborne. That you have to constantly collect the blood vials and your bullets.
Bro, I was trying to beat what at the end, what are they called? The procedural dungeons?
Oh yeah, the chalice dungeon.
Chalice dungeons, and all I would do dungeon, and then I'd have to come back and farm for vials for like 2 hours, and then I could go back and do the runs. That was like the worst for me about Blood to get the completion. I don't know if you had to do that to get the platinum for it
Which one?
or the for Bloodborne.
Yeah. I do
Yeah.
all those chalice dungeons, all that stuff. And again, the question, and this is something that I talked about before, and something that always comes up with this, is what is the point of the grind?
Yeah.
What is the player actually getting out of it? If it's supposed to be just a resource that they need to use for a fight, well, if they've done it one time, surely, like, they put in their time. Again, it's why the whole idea of the Estus Flask was such a godsend for these games.
Yeah.
I don't need to grind potions. I get infinitely replenishable potion that still has that limit. And again, it's how you present this kind of content to the player. That yes, I still have a limit of 6 or 10 swigs of my Estus, but I'm not punished long term. And again, I could go on this rant for the next hour, but you never want to punish the player mid to long term for their failure. You can do like a quick short term. And again, sometimes the short term is just simply, okay, you're here, now you're here. Like that's it. You went back to the checkpoint. That's punishment enough. You don't want to feel like you're here and now you're all the way down here because you lost all your experience and all your potions and you've lost, your equipment's been broken, so now you have to go repair that.
You got to go farm some stuff to repair your equipment before you can get back and then go do a corpse run. And
of course, heaven forbid you die collecting the resources you need to get the other character, so now you have to go get resources to get that guy, to then go back here to get this guy. That was the thing that just drove me crazy about that game, Let It Die. That, you lose your best character, and you have to create another character to farm to get that character, but then if that one dies, now you have to make another character to farm to get this character, to get this character. All the while, you're literally just not making progress, and then you finally get back to that boss, and he one-shots you again.
Yeah. I that's why I stopped playing that. I didn't play it for very long, but yeah, for sure.
If something has to be, again, repeated or done consistently or constantly, make it as smooth as possible.
If or I do like or Factorio it. Like eventually it's Factorio automated eventually. Like there's no reason to, like, by the time you can do a chalice dungeon, why should I have to go farm the vials? I should just be able to, like, I don't know, buy vials or give me vials. I don't know. I shouldn't have to farm them.
Yeah. And that was, again, one of the most effective forms of progression in a logistics game. You don't need to grind or you don't need to worry about not having something, just automate it. that was the thing about with Dyson Sphere. I remember I spent like 4 hours one night. I was like, you know what? I am going to automate everything. I'm just going to turn this plant in my automation factory, and then I never have to set any of this up ever again. And it was like the most glorious thing at the end, where it was just like, I put the resource in, it goes everywhere it goes exactly where I go. Like, I never have to manually make anything ever again. It's like, oh, the angels are coming down. At like 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm done. I did
it. Good bed.
Oh, yes. You missed one, you had to go collect it all over again. And again, that's actually another really important point. It's somewhat of a tangent, but I think it's related. Don't punish the player for real life. If they need to leave, if they have to go do something, if they have to go to sleep, have a quick save or a temp save. You do not want to factor saving. I mean, like, actual, like, turning the game off saving to, a major form of difficulty. Because we've seen some people argue, well, you have to get back to the save point because it's a challenge. Okay, I get that. Then just give me a temp save. Let me pause the game, come back in, deletes that save, keeps that challenge. But again, if I have to go pick up my son, or if I have to go do something, you can't just say, well, sorry, son, I was stuck in this dungeon for the last hour. You can find your own way home.
My son was always cool. I was like, I'm stuck in this challenge dungeon. I'm farming vials. And he was, all right, Dad.
I'll hitchhike back. I'll figure out my own way.
I'm a grown man now. Figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, as a quick time check, we are just about an hour in. I do want to talk a little bit more about short games.
Short games, yeah.
Anything more about, like, longer games?
No, I think we pretty much covered all that. Let's get on to the short games. My favorite.
So let's kind of flip the whole thing around here, because we've spent the last hour, I guess, aptly enough, talking about lengthier experiences. But one of the things that a lot of people have been worried about over the last few years, especially with the rise of refunds and now how long my game is, does a short game, or even a micro game, carry weight? And when we say micro game, I'm going to consider any game that's less than, I would say, 20 to 30 minutes. So there's a lot of short form horror games on Steam and on itch. So for this kind of experience, do you think that there is a minimum game length? Like, do you think like a game that could be maybe 2 minutes long but still hold value, or should still be like market friendly, I guess?
I mean, I don't know about 2 minutes long, but I think that you could probably pull it off with like I would say like 15 minutes or a 30-minute game. I think could be like amazing, and like people would be like, oh my gosh, like because one of the things is we haven't really talked about is like time is a barrier, right? That's a time. So like, okay, people are perusing the Xbox thing and they say, oh, this is 50 hours to beat and this one's 15 minutes. Well, let me try out the 51. So in that regard, like, it is an attractant, I believe, in a way, right? I for sure know that you can get across an amazing, like, especially for like a story or whatever, you can definitely like get across what you're trying to say in a short amount of time, like 15 to 30 minutes for sure. But I think like for Meteor, like you gotta add a little bit of gameplay and stuff like that. I'm probably gonna get to around 3 hours, 4 hours, like at a minimum. But I definitely think you could have some amazing gems with micro stuff, and they can really they can really go out of the box and really experiment. I think some of those are like just amazing gems, and I really love when people do aim for smaller games and micro games, just because like it shows a lot about respecting time too, in a way, right? Like I'm big about that, respecting the time, streamlining your stuff, and you know, like really like paring it down, and instead of like it being bloated and not really and very unfocused, I guess is what I would say, is you can really focus it down, and you know.
Yeah, and I think that kind of focus is, again, like something that is a major point, as we talked about in the previous section with pacing and progression. That you want to feel like the game is always firing on all cylinders, and it's very hard when we start extending that out. When we go very short form, it is very easy to present, a 20-minute slice that is, incredibly atmospheric. It's very unique. But to Vincent's comment, and this is something that I think a lot of developers have been like fearing and dreading, is the 2 hour refund window.
Yeah.
Again,
Mm-hmm.
for people who are somehow new watching this, that Steam has a anything goes 2 hour refund policy. You buy a game, doesn't matter if you spent $1 or $500 on it. If it is under 120 minutes, although that is give or take, they sometimes will go a little bit further than that. You want to refund that game, go. They will not argue with anything from you. But again,
you don't even have to say why, right? Like you just say, "I want a refund," and that's it. Yeah.
No, you just say, you know what, I'm done. And it's led to a lot of people being very nervous about their titles. And again, I think part of it is deservedly so. But I also feel like some of it's a little overblown.
Not to cut you off, but I feel like most like we're at a different time in game dev and like and our games, and it's like people that are buying these small games, or they understand that you're like a developer, or they understand the studio, and I would doubt that most of them are going out of their way to refund your game like immediately. I'm sure though they are the outliers, and like maybe they had a really loud tweet or something, but I'm sure they are in the minority, and most of the people will buy your game and not refund it.
I feel it's that same kind of argument when we talk about piracy.
Yeah.
That a lot of people feel that, everyone's going to pirate your game and, it's going to ruin your title. But I think, as you said, I think the mentality has both changed. And I also think that while I'm sure piracy and refunds are an issue, I don't feel it's going to be the make or break of a studio. If you remember from last year, there was that big hubbub over that one like short form horror game, and they were talking about how they're going to have to leave the industry because everyone's refunding that game. But then when people were like playing it, they were noticing a lot of like weird issues, or like it didn't feel like it felt like some of it was being overblown by the developer and people rushing to that defense.
Which game was this?
It was a short horror game. I think it was something Vietnam. It was like one that, again, like it was another one like those like very jump scare heavy horror games that all the horror streamers played it. You can I love like those reaction videos when it's just like everyone reacting the same way at the same time at the same point.
Yeah.
And again, I think this goes back to what we were saying in terms of quality. That if you can do an amazing, god tier 30-minute long game.
Yes.
I think the chance that everyone's going to refund that is going to be very low.
Right.
But like we said, if someone plays your game and it's annoying, it's frustrating, people don't want to play it, they can refund it. And like we said, if someone leaves your game with a horrible experience, let's say they leave the horrible experience at 110 minutes in, they may decide to refund that because did I really get my money's worth? And the discussion of, money to video game, we do not have the time for that one here. That is another, 8-hour long talk.
Yeah.
And again, like, it's very hard to equate dollars to content. Like we've said, we've seen 300, 400-hour long games that people barely touch. We've seen, 30-minute, 2-hour long games where everyone plays it through and everything in between.
What's the completion rate on Journey? I want to know, like, because like I always bring up Journey, but to me, like, it's just one of those games that like really hit the, like, to me at like the amount of time to play it, like who could play the game, like it was basically anyone could jump into the game and play it. Of course the asynchronous multiplayer and stuff like that, but but yeah, just like when it's really short, and I think that's just another attraction. I think that if people know that the game is like within their reach to beat, like it's the time is not like 180 hours, right? Because if you tell me,
Mm-hmm.
okay, hey man, Dying Light 2, 500 hours, are you ready? And I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't know. There's not. And you know, but if they're like, hey, you want to play this really cool indie game? It's like 3 hours. I swear it's the coolest game ever. I will definitely play it. Right. So, you know, I just think that there's so much room, especially in the indie space, to make, smaller, shorter, even in the double A and triple A space to make some, really succinct, smaller games and respect players' times.
Mm-hmm. And again, it all comes down to what are you delivering in that
Yeah.
time frame. If
What
you
is the
can,
player doing? What are they doing?
yeah, like with Dying Light, and again, like Dying Light and Elden Ring are really good examples of kind of these polar opposites. That,
Mm-hmm.
Dying Light boasting here's 500 hours of stuff and MacGuffins and all that. A lot of people are like, no. And then Elden Ring is like, here's this wide open world. Go. Just
Whatever.
go,
Yeah.
get out, do whatever the heck you want. And people spend 100 hour plus in that game. And part of it, again, is the pacing. And part of it, again, is that quality of what you're doing. If you can make a game that is 300 hours enjoyable for every minute, good on you, do that game. But if you only have, let's say, 50 hours or 10 hours or an hour of great content, then it's probably better to focus on that. You
Yeah.
want. Okay.
And what you said, like if you only have an hour of content, or if you only have like 2 hours of content, like when we're talking about the padding, like being aware of what the game actually has in content is like really important, right? And like when people are overselling it for marketing reasons, or for whatever reasons, like there's various reasons to say this game has 40 hours of gameplay when really it shouldn't, or maybe it only has like two or three, right, Josh? So,
Yeah.
you know.
And to Pony's comment about roguelikes, again, that's another very big point. Again, it leads back to that pacing and progression. A good roguelike or roguelite is maybe 20 minutes to an hour long for each run. But it's a replayable 20 minutes to an hour long of each run. And that feels a lot better. Again, what sounds better to someone? This story takes 600 hours to clear, or this game is about 40 minutes to an hour long runs and you can keep playing it again and again and again.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely go for that option instead. If replayability, that's the thing, right? Like it also like it's like a different way. Like if it's the gameplay is like 2 minutes, 3 minutes each run, and then you can just keep doing it over and over again. Take a break, stop, go pick up the kids, do whatever you need to do, come back, and you can do the runs. That's really nice and totally respectful of the time. That's another way to do it. Like if the run or the actual thing is very short, you allow the player to come out, like you were saying earlier, where you're not forcing the player to play another 10 minutes to get to the next auto save, or to get to the next save point or something. That is like I've been there where like I've had to lose all my progress because I've had to leave, but there was no way to stop the game or pause the game or save it. So, there's nothing you can do, right? So yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, to Chris's comment, yeah, that was one of the complaints about Gunfire, that you can't easily leave and drop in, drop out of a
Yeah,
run.
yeah.
And again, some of that is pacing and some of that is just the design of your game. And you want to make it as effortlessly as possible to jump in and jump out. Like we said before with fighting games, one of the reasons for their pick up and play is that, what is a match, 90 seconds,
Yeah,
2 minutes long,
yeah.
and then it's over.
That's more.
I do another one, and then I do
Hmm.
another one. It's again, as we haven't said this quote yet, it's that one more turn feel from Civilization. That
Uh,
there's always that next thing pushing you to keep playing.
no, carrot on the stick, one more turn. I don't think we've ever said that on the podcast yet, Josh.
What's your guys' game list? Like for me, like I again like for a lot of games, I just want to make sure that I'm enjoying it from
Enjoying it, yeah.
moment one to however long. And if I lose interest, it becomes a lot hard to get me back into it.
Yeah, like if I can't tell you like how long the game was, I'm like, I don't know, maybe it was like from here to here, but it was awesome the whole time. That's probably a good sign. But if I'm like, it was like 190 hours to I beat it though. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
not the best feeling, right? But I think like a sweet spot, a really good sweet spot for like most games is probably like 12 to 15 hours, something like that. For like most more grander games, like depending on, on length and stuff like that. But again, you can always go smaller, lower, but the most important thing is just how much you're enjoying the time that you're playing, right? And what
Mm-hmm.
you're actually doing, and if it matters, um, what you're doing moment to moment.
Yeah. Like with Library of Ruina, like that's another example of a game where it doesn't want to end. Like it's like, okay, here's the finale. You gotta fight the final 10 battles, which can take like 4 or 5 hours. You beat that, and then it goes, oh no, wait, now this guy wants to fight you, so you gotta go fight him for another hour. Oh wait, you beat him, now you want the true ending, now you gotta fight these other 6 fights for who knows how many more hours. Oh, you beat that? Well, now those guys you beat, 20 hours ago, they're back for round two, so you gotta fight them. And then you think the game is over, but no, now someone else just shows up for the real final. And yeah, like that's when it gets a little much. It just feels like everyone's just like waiting for the end and then just show and go, hey, I want to fight you now. Now I
Yeah.
want to fight you now. It's like, just give me like the revolving door. But I think with a lot of short form games, before I forget, like one thing that does annoy me when we see from a lot of like indie horror is that it feels like the whole point of the 10 to 20 minutes is just that one jump scare at the end. Where it's like
Yeah.
you're just spending like 15 minutes like priming for the jump scare. It happens and then it's like, okay, title screen, game over. Like I
Yeah.
feel again like that is a little too short and it feels a little too constrained.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm really looking forward to like the horror roundtable so we can really get into discussing
Mm-hmm.
that. But horror games horror games are just hard to do. And I've always said that before. Like I'm not sure like even how you do like a horror movie or how you would even do it now, because I kind of feel like we've all seen it before. Like how much can you just go boo or whatever, like there's only so much you can do. And so instead I think you have to really lean into more like psychological, or like you really have to get into better writing, really get the player interested in more like meatier ways, because like superficial scares and stuff like that or gory stuff, it works, right? But we've seen it all before. Like we've seen all those horrors before. So like when it comes to horror, yeah, I definitely think you probably need more time to tell a story, to get involved and to get emotionally involved in the horror story, to have a reason to be fearful of something psychologically, right? And I think that's probably the best way to go about it. Um, I mean, you can't be like, look at this ultra realistic head falling off, and it's like I don't think that works too much anymore. So
Yep, and it's very hard again to prolong horror. Like again, there's a reason why I wrote an entire book about it, which everyone should go buy or be scared tonight.
yes.
And good pacing again is all about knowing what value does everything in your game have. And when I say value in this respect, I mean how much can you get out of it? If you can make like a procedurally generated haunted house that can last 5 to 10 hours, that's great. If your game is really only built around maybe 1 to 2 scares, maybe like 30 to 40 minutes of gameplay, then that's it. And again, it's why when we did the roguelike roundtable, and I think we have to do a topic about why everything is a roguelike, we haven't done that one, that when all the roguelike developers come on for that, one of the reasons why everything's become a roguelike is because it adds that kind of extra value. That if you can make a 30-minute chunk of gameplay very highly enjoyable and you can repeat that infinitely or almost infinitely, that's a lot of value for someone. And again, if someone plays a game like Slay the Spire or Monster Train, whatever, and they get they beat the run, it's an hour, and they go, okay, I beat the game, it's done. They got their fill. If someone wants to go all the way up to, Ascension level 25 and spend hours and hours, they're also getting their fill. But ultimately, again, I think the mission statement for our episode this week is that you want the player to leave content. You want them to leave knowing that they got everything they want out of this game, they enjoyed it, and that they're willing to give your next game or your game after that a try. Because if they leave annoyed or frustrated, or they just leave oh, it's over? All of a sudden the game just cuts to an end screen, it's okay. What's the chance of them going to go back to your game? Because as we've said, people will harp on the bad stuff. That's what they're going to remember more. And if they left your first game feeling annoyed, why would they give you more money?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's always one thing to remember. The voices of the negativity are going to be louder, usually, than the voices. They're the loud ones usually. So you're going to hear a lot of that, especially.
Mm-hmm. And the days in which you can, again, pad a game out and say, if someone's going to be dedicated and, the real fans will stick around for 30 minutes or 30 hours of filler and doing all these repeatable, grindy stuff. No, that's not going to work anymore because everyone is trying to get a piece of your time. And that means that the developer who can figure out how to do all this the most elegant and streamlined way, they're going to succeed. And again, if somebody really enjoys Game A, and you come along with a worse version of Game A, why would they want to play that? Again, how many platformers have I played that have tried to copy or be another Mario? How many, when I did the Realms Deep play this past week, for those of you who are watching this live, how many of those games suspiciously just played like another Doom, or another Quake, or another Duke Nukem? Why should I give, more attention to those games when, what Josh said, I can play this amazing, unique, never-before-seen game? Yes, maybe it's only, a fraction of that time, but I'm going to get more value out of the minutes I spend in that game than the minutes in these other games.
Yeah. And the real important, Josh, everything is vying for our time, right? And this nightmare difficulty +3, time is different. And so, and then everything is trying to get our time. So definitely respecting players' time, I think really is valued very highly now. And players can tell.
Yeah. I was going to say, Pony's comment, I think, is another really important point, that if you design your game to be very flexible in terms of player skill, that if someone can beat a game in 5 hours, just as someone can beat a game in 20 to 30 hours, if they're both enjoying their time, if they both feel like they're getting their money's worth, more power to you. That is what I say about the magic of Nintendo. Or, Nintendo Match cannot be confused with BioWare Match. That someone can play a Mario Odyssey or any of their 3D platformers.
Yes.
And whether I've never picked up a controller before or I am an expert and I've been in all those games, I'm still enjoying that. And you don't want someone, again, one other example of pattern we didn't talk about very briefly is when you hold stuff back from people who already know that. If I'm already this expert platformer fan, I don't have to wait 30 hours to unlock a double jump or to be able to do some kind of advanced tech.
Yeah.
But again, with the Mario games, they explicitly don't tutorialize advanced stuff until players are, at that point, but they never lock that.
It's there. You can do the hat flip and do all the stuff right at the beginning almost. I think pretty much once you can jump, in Odyssey you have all the things, but they don't tell you about it till way later, in the stages as it gets more difficult. They're like, hey, by the way, if you want to get over that star, you got to do a jump flip hat thing, and you're like, oh, cool. And if you already knew, you were already there doing it, right? So
you don't feel like the game is holding you back. But at the same time, you don't feel like the game is just throwing you, out the window saying, figure out how the parachute works on your way down. And it's very hard for a lot of developers to get that pacing right, to make it engaging from the first moment without overwhelming. And if you can do that right, you're definitely going to be ahead of the curve.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I like that. Figure out how the parachute works on the way down. We didn't play test it. So
there you go. Hold A to confirm while you're falling, too, for each prompt. Let's see. Back. Yep. And yet, it's very hard to get that scale, that pacing right. But it's oftentimes that difference between making sure that people of varying skill levels can enjoy your game. Break the game here and never get past this boss. Yeah, you want to be, again, very mindful. And like we've said, this is a tangent that's too big to get into too much here, but you don't want to have mechanics that are required that you don't introduce to the player. Like to what Josh said with Mario. Imagine if that triple spin hat jump was required before the onboarding actually introduced that. You don't want onboarding for something after the player has to do it. That is not good pacing.
Yeah. Been there. I don't know which games, but I know lots of games have done it. And I'm like, wait, you tell me now.
Mm-hmm. It's the difference between the player figuring it on their own as like an aha versus, again, making it required and the player's going, wait, you're telling me this whole time I could have just hovered jump over there?
Yeah.
Well, how was I supposed to know that?
Yeah. Yeah. Not cool.
Is there a place for cinematic or should we burn? I think cinematic games can work, but again, it's a very different audience.
Yeah.
For somebody like me, again, the idea of sitting through and watching a 3-hour cutscene without any gameplay, that's pulling teeth.
Yeah.
But, for me, playing something like Doom Eternal on Nightmare, that's, my happy, relaxing time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like NG plus 6 DS1 is my zen time, but a cutscene, it's the worst.
Yep. And like we've said, even if your game is entirely or majorly cinematically driven or cutscene driven, that does not excuse UI and UX. As I said, with the Immortality, I played for about 30 seconds. The controls annoyed me. I was like, I don't want to play this anymore. So all that talk about people loving the story and how great it is, my experience with that game is 25 seconds. And conversely, I've spent several hundred hours playing Left 4 Dead, or what is my most played game? It's probably either Payday 2 or Left 4 Dead 2 at this point, in terms of the most played I've spent in a single game.
Really? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta see what mine is. I'm pretty sure it's a Soulsborne game.
Get to the dragon coin. Thanks for releasing me. So you, yeah, that's great. I know. Pony's like, hey, now we're going to teach you the thing you've already tried to learn, or they force you into a tutorial after you've shown that you've done it all. Hey, would you like to do this 4th section and learn how to jump after I've spent the last hour jumping around? No, I'm good. I think I got this down.
Mm-hmm.
And like we said, if something is required, you have to do the onboarding before the requirement. And this is also why structuring your levels are very important. If I can accidentally wander off to this section that required all this stuff, and then the tutorial was actually over here.
Yeah.
Again, like the whole Elden Ring point about how people missed the tutorial. On one hand, it's it's funny and joking. On the other hand, that is a UX, nuclear siren. Something is not right about that onboarding.
I thought I said that was the best tutorial of all time, Josh.
You completely missed the tutorial.
Yeah, you missed the tutorial. Best tutorial ever.
10 out of 10 right there. But I think I'm out of points. Anything from you regarding Lent that we didn't touch on?
No, I mean, just real quick on the small games. I mean, I really hope, for the devs that are watching, on your next one or whatever, go for some small games. I think small games have a really the audience is going to be growing, and I feel like just like as our time is changing and warping, that we're going to have a little bit, we'll have a lot more respect for smaller games. So I think that smaller games have a really good place, and you can do a lot, and like that would like don't feel forced, or maybe the better point would be don't feel forced to pad out your game just to try to reach like an arbitrary, like, okay, well now I'm at 12 hours. Whoo, no one's going to say anything. They're probably going to say something because it probably should have been 8 and you made it 12. So just don't feel forced to pad out your game. I'll just go with that one instead. Don't pad out the game if not needed while you're working on it.
Yep, and the more unique or esoteric your game is, you should also be very mindful of your game length as well. If you're trying to do something that no one has ever seen before, you don't want to tell them, here's this unknown game that takes 50 hours to actually play. And we've seen a lot of short-form games that do very different things. Stuff like Cook Serve Delicious. I've lost some of the examples in my mind. But there have been a lot of games that have done like the co-op style games. You know, like the co-op platformers or co-op puzzle-solving kind of games. Portal 2's co-op campaign, I think, is another really good example. I think it's like an hour, maybe like 2 hours long.
Yes, and it's a really good game. That's a good game. Like if anybody's like, hey, what game can I play with my girlfriend or something real quick? That's a good one. That's a really good one to play with your significant other. I don't want to be a significant other. Sorry. Yeah. And because it's a short game, but yeah, that's an amazing like example, like a 2-player campaign that's like an hour. That's sweet. That's really cool.
Yep. And again, it's how long can you feasibly stretch or use these mechanics. If you can come up with 100 different ways to make a portal gun feel unique, do that. If you can only come up with 30 different ways of making it unique, you should probably do that as well. Like we've said, length is no long... Thank you, Chris, for that. There's your backhanded compliment of the stream. If you can make a game enjoyable, make it that length. You do not want it... Like we said, length is not a measure of quality anymore.
Yeah,
If you can sit there and say, you know what, I can design 500 original puzzles using my mechanics, do that. If you can say, well, I can design 50, but you know what, let's make it 150. You know, we'll just do like palette swaps, or, you know, instead of going left to right, we go right to left. People aren't going to look at that and say, wow, there's so many levels. They're looking and go, oh my god, there's so many levels. Why is this game still going?
It's Fire World again, and ice puzzles now, and then sludge puzzles. The sludge puzzle area was so slow.
Yeah, and like we said, like, remember how every game had a sewer level and an underwater level.
Yes.
Do not slow your game down to try and make a point. Again, people aren't going to say, well, you know, I spent 2 hours, but I'm going to enjoy spending this next 4 hours in this dark and grimy sewer.
Been waiting for the sewer to level this whole time.
Oh, I still remember Vampire the Masquerade Redemption sewer section, and oh my god, like, it was so bad the fans had to fix that when they did their big epic patch for it. The hacking mini game, the don't forget the pipe one where you have to connect all.
Yes, I was seeing that. That was the puzzle game I was thinking of in my head. It was like a pipe game.
Or my favorite puzzle, the one where you hit one thing and it affects like 2 other things. So it's like you have to constantly remember what everything does. Oh, I remember there's that horror game that I played where it's like we're in the spooky section, but now you have to do this matching the levers and all the button switch, and I'm like, no, I'm done. Like, I don't care about the horror. The monster can go on a rampage. Nope, I don't want to do the same.
Yeah, I could barely do it in Resident Evil. I'm not gonna do it in your.
And again, that's a good example of something that doesn't fit your core gameplay. If my core gameplay is about being scared or, you know, hunting down an enemy, I don't want to spend, let's say, 20 minutes, you know, whittling a stick in order to turn into a spear to then craft my spear gun to then have it break, to then have to make another spear gun. Again, there is a reason why I don't play survival games on this channel.
Me neither. Me neither.
Mm-hmm. Fishing, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Vincent, yeah, do the fishing mini game no matter where. Even if there's no puddles, no bodies of water, you should still be able to fish in the game.
Yeah, anywhere.
Ground fishing, there we go, we
Ground
just got
fishing.
it.
Ground fishing, sky fishing.
Mm-hmm. And like we said, there is something about, I think ultimately, again, I think I may be getting to padding here, but again, there is something about making every aspect of your game streamlined. You want to make everything very snappy. You want the player to be always enjoying what you're doing in the game. If you can make, again, walking or rolling or skateboarding fun and enjoyable, then it doesn't matter if, your map is full of all these points of interest or if there's only one. If that simple act of moving around keeps them engaged, they'll play your game for hours and hours on end, even if you only have, let's say, an hour's worth of story. Just that idea of, hey, it's so fun to skateboard or air glide or walk. If you can make skipping enjoyable in your game, there are people who will spend dozens and dozens of hours doing that. But if that stuff is annoying, if it's frustrating, if you don't want to do that and you force a player, they're going to check out.
You could just vibe out in Bloodborne rolling over crates. It felt so good, you know what I mean? So
you gotta do that physics roll into the barrels in every Souls-like.
For sure. Definitely.
But I think that will do it for me. Roll the game.
There we go. There's our game idea. Crate roll the game.
There's your next game after Samurai Pig. Just all physics objects, just roll into them.
That's what I've been working on. That's what I'm going to work on.
And yeah, Pony, I've spent like several hours when I play a game like Etrian Odyssey just to build my party and just figure out exactly what I want to do. Again, there are people who will do that. Yeah. And there are people who will just say, you know what? Give me a standard party, random everything, get me in. I don't want to deal with that stuff. Just let me get into your game.
Yeah, like what was the Monster Hunter on the PSP? Anyway, that one. So you'd have to manually like craft all your stuff before you go and stuff like that, and that was just the worst. Like, so I'd have to prepare, and I didn't even know where to prepare, right? Because I wasn't gonna look up a FAQ or anything. Why would I do that? And so I would like craft everything on my own, and then you'd go in there. It was all the wrong stuff. I didn't have the right weapon or whatever. So if they would have had an auto craft or recommended like loadout, then that would have been cool. But I remember doing it the hard way back then.
Yep, and that was one of the things they did with Monster Hunter World. You can set up your templates. You can set up your auto crafting. So if I just want to jump into fighting a monster, all my stuff is nicely organized. All my gear is ready and raring to go. I don't need to worry about that. And again, you can have elements. You can have elements that can take a little bit more time if someone wants to do that. Again, for every one of our examples of streamlining, making it as smooth as possible, there's someone who probably wants to do that grindy thing. They want to manually, craft that sword from this block of steel into an actual weapon, and there's probably a game for them.
Yeah, but definitely. There's like inventory in the management. The game will be the bomb for somebody. Like, that would be, people would be like, finally, my game is here. All I'm doing is menus and choosing the right armor. And, I don't even get to fight. So it's the best. And someone would love that game.
There's that game that I played. I didn't play it on stream, but there's a game that's literally just about managing your Resident Evil 4 style inventory. It's all puzzles.
Yes.
And I love that game. It was a lot of fun. Backpack Hero. It's basically inventory Tetris the roguelike. And it works well.
So cool.
So again, there is a market for everything. But it all comes down to how you pitch it, how you pace your game. If you tell me your game is a mile a minute, Bayonetta meets Ultra Kill, and I load it up and it's just, lines and lines of spreadsheets. If it's EVE Online, if you tell me your game is Bayonet and it turns out to be EVE Online, I'm not going to be very happy there. There's the old bait and switch.
The combos are in Excel sheets, Josh.
There you go.
Sheets MMO for sure. Yeah, I mean, people even make games in Excel. I know you can do games in Excel, so.
And yeah, there's
juicy menus. Yeah, it's good.
If you can make pushing a button enjoyable. I mean, mobile developers have been patenting and refining that for the past decade. That you can click that gotcha button, and it's like just that gives you the dopamine push.
Yeah, like really good UI sounds and like really good reactive UI. Man, that goes a long way. Like big time. I know we harp on UI and menus a lot, but it's super important. And again, I'll say it again, like I always say on stream, the first thing that every streamer looks at when they're playing your game, they go through your menu. So don't forget.
Yeah. And as another
where's
tangent,
the volume slider? They don't have the volume slider uninstalled.
Oh yes, exactly. Like it's that difference between when we play a good platform, like Mara makes that hoo hoo noise, and like we play that one game, the guy every time he just goes every time he jumps, like, why do I want to hear that every time I jump? And no mute talk.
People busting into your room. What's going on?
Exactly. Oh yeah, but we are going. If we're not careful, we'll be on tangents for the rest of the night, and I do at some point need to eat and get ready.
Yeah.
Don't want to pass out on stream, so I think we will wrap things up here. And yeah, if for those of you watching, if you have any suggestions for future topics, again, let us know down below. Do the liking, subscribing, and commenting. My information is up there as well as down in the description.
Same thing for me. My links are down below. Link and follow Wishlist Samurai's Pig, buy Josh's books, join the Discord, chat with us. Yeah.
And we will be back next Saturday around 5 p.m. ET for pizza. Chris has to supply her own with pizza.
That's right. That's right.
But we'll be back next week and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Until our next show, everybody, have a great rest of your weekend.